ARBA President Josh Humphreys is all the way from Tennessee this evening. Scott Rodriguez is all the way from Colorado, Wyoming to present. And they're going to present actually together. Scott's going to handle rollback fur, and Josh is going to handle flyback fur. And they're going to explain why in a second they are teaming up on this instead of doing it separate like Rex versus the other breeds. Okay? Go for it, guys.
Okay, excellent. Glad to be here tonight. So on the flyback fur, I'm going to give a brief description of what they'll kill a few rabbits. Scott's going to explain rollback fur, then you all can tell what the difference and similarities of the fur is. There's a major difference between flyback and rollback. So when you strike the fur from the tail to the head on flyback rabbits, that fur quickly returns. Their fur is shorter than rollback coats, and they should flay very evenly across the head. So when you strike that coat, it quickly returns.
Okay. Yes, and to echo Josh's sentiments, it's nice to be here. It's a great night of education. So I'm going to talk about our rollback fur breeds. And in contrast to how Josh said with the flyback, that quicker return, a rollback is going to have a more gradual return of that coat when you stroke from the tail to the shoulders. And one of the things that makes that rollback unique is the density of that undercoat is going to give it that slower, gradual return as our standard says. So keep those differences in mind as we have you kind of touch the rabbits and feel the differences.
Okay, somebody want to come feel the...
Here, guys, come and get closer. This is the hands-on.
A lot of this is hands-on. You got to feel. So go all the way from the tail, all the way to the head. See how this animal's fur flies back very quickly. Go back. See that? Have a very quick return. Male for tail. These animals also have a shorter guard here than some of these rollbacks. So it should have a very even coat, very quick return.
So does anyone in the audience know how many breeds of rabbits have flyback fur? Take a guess. How many breeds of rabbits in the ARBA that are recognized? 49, exactly. So of those 49, how many have flyback fur? Any guesses?
28.
28's a guess, all right. That's a good guess. 17?
20.
20, all right. I'm sorry, so, all right. Josh, what's the answer? 23 of our 49 breeds have flyback fur. That's a lot. That's almost half, right?
So then, in contrast, we have a rollback here, which is our Holland Law. So this is going to have a denser undercoat and a longer guard hair, and it's going to give a more slow, gradual return as opposed to the quicker return. So if we want to come and
Feel the Holland, feel the difference.
the difference in that texture, see how that gradually goes back and how that snaps back a lot quicker.
You guys want to get in there? Go for it.
This one is rollback first. Which one's
Flyback. Yeah.
faster to tell, but then this one's like longer.
Yes, exactly.
The rollback?
Can you feel that? It's got more, it's got more dense, yeah.
One thing too, when you're evaluating fur, if you have a damp rag, just kills the static.
You can feel her coat, and hers is one way, and you'll see a completely different feeling.
Should we ask them how many rollback?
That's a great one. So anyone want to take a guess? If we know that 23 of the breeds have flyback fur, how many have rollback fur? 26 of the rest of them?
Don't forget the Rex and the Wool.
Any other guesses? Yeah? Over here? No?
Who's that?
Must say 8.
Okay, so what is it, Scott?
14. 14. So a few less than flyback.
And the hollow mop is part of that.
Yes. And so does everyone know what breed Scott is known for? No? Well, he's touching it. He's a hollow mop breeder. So do you think hollow mop fur is important? Or fur on a hollow mop, is that important?
Of course. When fur on all bunnies is important.
Okay, so Scott's going to tell you.
Mini Rex, but we still have 7 points on our Holly fur. So it does have to have a good, correct rollback texture. It's really great because we have another one here that doesn't quite have the density, and I want you to feel it returns a little quicker. So that rabbit, you'd faulted a bit on the overall quality of the fur, and that's this one.
But each breed has a quality of outcome that's unique. So with a common law, they have a lot of
So Scott was saying, you know, that Holland Lobs don't have as many points on fur. They have 7 points on fur. All right.
You know, not like mini rags or fur breeds, but it's still important, and you want to get the ideal right texture. So this one, if anybody felt the first one had that nice dense undercoat, a little longer guard hair, had that gradual. This rabbit doesn't quite carry the density of that undercoat, so it's got a bit more of a quicker return. So if
they're totally different from tail all the way up.
because it doesn't quite have the undercoat density.
Yeah, it returns a little bit quicker than the other one.
So with Holland Lobs having only 7 points on fur, there's one rollback breed that actually has a lot of points on rollback fur. Anyone want to take a guess what rollback breed has the most points on its fur?
I don't know what the breed
French Lob. That's a guess. Any other guesses on which rollback breed has the most points on its fur?
You're going live?
Yeah, we're going live. So the answer is the standard chinchilla. Standard chinchilla. Yep, that's on your questionnaire there in the rollback section. You'll find. Yeah. See, they have question number 4 says the blank allots 30 points to fur, making it the rollback breed with the most amount of points. That's standard chinchilla. Yep.
Tell me what you feel.
Excuse me, guys.
And that first one we had out, it was shorter, much faster return. This has a slower return. Yep, you can see all the guard hairs up through here. Make it very wiry in texture to its coat.
So do you have 3 examples of varying fur textures here in the flyback? And I'm sure you already described it, but maybe you could do it again for us?
This animal's a little bit longer in coat. It also has a lot of guard hairs, very coarse in texture. So when you feel this rabbit's coat, it's going to have a complete different feel than the other two.
Because
Mainly
of
that extra length of coat and those extra guard hairs.
one of the questions on the handout they've got is how long should the guard hair be over the undercoat, right? And that's important, correct?
About an eighth of an inch. That rabbit's too long. So feel this coat. It still has a little guard hair.
So like Josh,
Still a little bit longer.
Californians,
Over its shoulder, it has much better finish, much better evenness, better flyback coat over its shoulder. But it's still not quite finished, pretty broken over the top of its hip, hindquarter.
Now, is there a difference between finish and condition and genetics and what the rabbit actually grows for fur?
Yeah, it constantly changes. You know, that's fur is genetic, and then also time of year, climate change, if the animal's stressed. You know, you see animals that towards the end of the show, they trot. You know, heat in the building, you see an animal that's very finished, very pretty coat in the morning, the afternoon, starting to loosen up. So a lot of factors involved overall finish and texture of coat. So feel this coat.
rollback with the most points on it.
This animal has the best finished coat, the best texture, the best return to its coat. It's shorter, doesn't have the extra length of guard here, like that third animal.
The interesting thing
So a complete different finish.
blemish
It has all of it's a good balance. If you get these flyback rabbits that have too much density, they tend to get longer coats and tend to be very slow in their return. So it's a balance to have enough density, but still have a good return to its coat. But you can definitely feel the difference.
And now, what's commercial normal fur? What does that mean? When you have a breed that, if you get their standard, like the cow, it says their fur is
Commercial
And it doesn't describe their fur in the Cal Standard, correct?
That standard, on page 31, there's a variety of breeds that conform to that standard.
These two are part
Other flyback breeds, when you read the standard, they all use terminology of short, snappy, even coat, softer texture. So these animals, none of them call for coarse texture for a coat, except the guard here is called for almost all the breeds that have flyback. We want a nice, even length coat.
size
Not too
rabbit, but it has
still
a
flies back,
rollback.
but not too coarse, not too long, so it doesn't present a very even appearance to the coat.
And if you were to compete in the commercial fur class at the convention, for example, are all flyback breeds eligible for that class? Okay, so all commercial normal furs are flyback, but not all flyback fur are considered commercial normal, correct?
Correct, because there is a separate standard for 10 of those breeds.
When you're evaluating commercial fur in the standard, it actually breaks down points, right? For texture, density, finish. What's the most important feature to commercial fur?
Allows texture, 40 points. So it's like, you don't want a lot of extra guard hairs, you don't want to be too coarse in texture. Just enough guard hair to have a little resistance to it, but not coarse and wiry like that third area.
Do you guys get up here and feel these commercial furs? He's got the best example right now on the table of flyback fur. So please get in here. No, I'm going to go over now.
It is it's not quite finished, but you can get a good sense of that dense, fluffy outer coat and that longer guard hair is going to make that more of a thicker.
That actually, they're standard,
Nice and floofy.
So I'm sure you touched on it, Scott, but we think about commercial breeds of rabbits, and we think that they would probably have commercial fur, which is typically flyback. But there are 4 unique breeds of commercial type, right?
Yes.
That have.
We've been talking about.
Okay, so what have you guys come up with?
Who wants?
What 4 commercial breeds have rollback fur?
so it gives
We talked about the unit.
Go for it. Give us some guesses.
that coat, that's real fast, real quick, very soft texture. So it also,
Hayden knows.
Okay, Hayden. What 4 commercial type breeds have rollback fur?
The French lap, the American chinchilla, the American sable, and the
Fill this
long
fur.
tocado.
Plontojo. Okay, very cool.
Yes.
And then what about Beverin fur? Is that a little different as well?
So yes, that's our last high point to touch on with Beverin.
Even as the other animal.
So what quality of Beverin fur sets it apart from our other rollback rabbit?
Has anyone ever felt a Beverin? Yeah? All right. What about Michael? Have you ever felt a Beverin? Yeah. They're a rare breed, right? So they're not at every show. Okay, but obviously, what kind of fur do they have? Rollback or flyback? If Scott's talking about it. They have rollback fur. Okay. But do you see that question there at the top on page 2? They actually have a minimum and maximum fur length, and they DQ for it. It's very unique.
Yeah, who has a guess what those measurements would be? I think our rollbacks have a little bit of a longer fur in general.
Any guesses?
Take some guesses.
This is a good one for the registrar test. If you're going to study or work on royalty, Michael,
Inch and 2 inch. Impressive. You got it.
you're totally right. Yep. So minimum is, okay, maximum Beverin fur length is. Awesome. Very good job, guys.
Excellent.
Did you get to all the points on your sheet there?
Yes. You can see them.
Did I get them on? When I talked about the standard shins, yeah. Oh, what about the lion heads? You want to talk about those?
Oh, yeah. So, right. If you notice question number 4, we talked about the standard chinchilla, but we also have the lion head has 45 points divided between the mane and the coat, which is actually the fur on the saddle. It's actually the normal fur rather than the wool of the mane.
Do you guys know where the saddle is? If you're talking about the parts of the body on a rabbit, where is the saddle?
What would be the saddle? Right. Yes.
So if this was a lion head,
So exactly. So Lionhead's gonna have the mane, which is that
and the thing, too, on
wool,
these
which is
brokens,
35
you'll
points.
get
But
some
we
of these
also have
brokens that have
10
a little
points
vessel scattered
on
right
that
here,
roll
and that really
saddle.
sticks out.
So this would be comparable in texture and a gradual return that would be on the saddle.
The thing, too, on these Havana.
so if you were judging lion heads and they had a fur class, would you judge them on the mane or would you judge them on the coat, on the body? Anyone want to guess that? This is a trick question.
It is kind of a tricky one.
Both? Okay. So if you're judging lion heads, and after the breed judging, you're at the National Lion Head Show, okay? And there's a fur class. There is a fur class. Are they judged?
Breed fur.
Breed fur, yes. Good way to say that. It's breed fur. So it's lion head fur versus lion head fur. Okay? What part of the lion head fur is judged in lion head fur class? Okay, so no. So when you're
Think about
Scott,
the lion head, how we've got two different coat types on one rabbit. We have the mane, which is a wool, crimpy wool, and then we have what we just talked about, a saddle, which has what kind of fur on a lion head? Rollback. So when you're judging lion head breed fur, you're really focusing on the fur on that saddle, as opposed to a wool, which would be judging on that mane. But for breed fur, you want, and there's 10 points, so it's a good amount on saddle fur. So it's kind of a little counterintuitive. The majority points are actually on that wool, but because it's a breed fur, it's not shown in breed wool. It's shown as breed fur. So it's really trying to get that nice rollback texture on the saddle of the lion head.
What would you improve
You can tell they have a real soft texture to the coat.
then? Is it density?
And anytime
On
you're
that
hanging
rollback.
first,
So
all
Allison,
the way from the base, your hands
did you
all the
get
way
from
open.
this one?
So you can feel
This is that, see that gradual return?
Yeah.
It's got a thicker, more dense undercoat. Then we have this one, which is a little thinner in density, and it returns a little quicker. Wait, no. This is the other way around. This is the one with that nice density. Feel this then. Yeah, when you have this has a bit of a more quicker return. We're not going to call it a flyback at all, but it doesn't quite have the undercoat density, so it's not as gradual as this. And of course, our Mullins have minds of their own. You felt it. You could really feel it. So on the lion head, ideally, we want exactly with the She was really behaving.
this animal's not
Right
finished.
there, this is
That's
how you know. So this is the
Yeah, you can tell right here. It's got much better much better blades.
and then this one is a little thinner.
There's a lot of time weather or
Given that, what is it? What quality
certain rabbits are
rollback rabbit this one doesn't have that. It's got a longer return, so it does have a quicker return. Whereas the other one more ideally so Netherlands is calling it off. Some of the more fancier breeds are going back
So it's, things you can do good. Different things you can go rich
Just to be ready to go around when they ask them. The big showmanship question. Yeah.
Think about that.
All right, guys, I think we're going to switch groups now. This group's going to head over to the Rex area, and then Rex area is going to come over to here, all right? Thanks, Josh. That was awesome. Thank you.
Rollback part.
Don't worry, we're going to have all the answers for this later, and we're going to post on Facebook so everyone can see it if they missed it. Thank you very much. Okay, so your Rex crowd's going to come back over here.
So you guys are going to Rex, I'm going to Flyback and Rollback, and then we'll do Bull and Satin at the end.
All right, guys, so this is Brooke, and she's from Southern California, and she is a Rex breeder, okay? So she's going to talk today about Rex fur and give you some answers on your sheet about what's very unique and special and what made her fall in love with Rex and why she's driven how many hours to get here today?
Only 5.
Only 5. That's not bad. All right, cool. Brooke, go ahead.
So, only 2 Rex have that's going to be a mini Rex and a Rex. And they're very similar.
Allison, will you hold that cage down? Will you just put your hand on that hoop? Babysit. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, they're really sassy. They've been picked up for a long time. So, in mini Rex, it's 35 points for fur, 35, and 15 points for color. In Rex, it's 40 points for fur, and 10 points for color. So, if you count them together, they're both about 50 points each. They're technically like a Rex that's 5 more on fur.
I'm sorry, how many points for color for the Rex?
The Rex are 10 points for So the word that you want to use to describe the Rex code is plush, right? Everyone wants to say, oh, it's so soft, but soft is actually not a good thing in Rex. It's actually a negative thing. You don't want it to be soft. You want it to be plush. You want it to be able to spring back and feel like plushy, like a blanket, right? So there's 3 different attributes that you have to use when you're evaluating the coat. It's going to be texture, resistance, and density. So density is going to be like the actual number of hair follicles, like per square inch, right? Like how tightly packed the hair is. And then resistance is going to be how springy it is, right? When you press down, does it spring back, or can you see your handprint? Did it lay flat? Can you see your handprint down on the coat, right? You want it to spring back into position after you let go. Right? And the texture is going to be the texture. It's whenever you brush across it, is it cottony, is it silky, right? Or is it coarse, right? So all of those things interplay together. And so while I have her out, she's kind of grumpy. So this dough, when you're evaluating for density, you pinch, you can do the scissor pinch, you can do like Alan, and he does like this kind of pinch. Or sometimes when they're really dense, like this dough, she's got such dense fur, you can't actually get your fingers in there to scissor pinch it. So what you do is you would blow into the coat, and you can actually see how tightly packed the hair is. When you blow down to the skin, you'll be able to see almost no skin because it's so tightly packed when you blow into it. So when you feel the coat, you feel it going both directions. Pinch it, try to figure out the density. You pat the sides. They grow hair from bottom to top and back to front, so their butt's always going to be the most dense, and then the sides are going to be the next most dense. So you'll a lot of times see the judges, they pat the sides, they pat the back, they go like this across the top, because they're trying to feel where the coat's growing in, because sometimes the top hasn't grown in yet, so to feel what their coat feels like it's around the bottom rim, right? So this dough, if you guys want to feel her, she's very silky in her texture. And in texture, there's like a spectrum. You can have like a cottony all the way to like silky. And you don't want too cottony, you don't want too silky, you want somewhere in between. She's very on the silky spectrum for sure. And you can see that though because she looks intensely black. She looks super slick, super smooth. And you get that from that silky texture because the guard hair is shorter. And you get that silky texture, but you can see that she's thin, right? Her density is very thin, but it feels good. It's nice and smooth, and it looks nice and black. She's got a great finish. It's nice and even, but it's very thin, right?
So if you have low density and you blow into the coat, are you going to see more or less skin? Let's ask you this. If you guys are checking density, all right, and you blow into the fur and you see a lot of skin, and then you put one next to it and you blow in and you don't see a lot of skin. Which one is more dense? The one that has a lot of skin or less skin? Less skin, you got it, right? So when you're checking density, Brooke, at your rabbitry, not at a rabbit show, but when you're like intensely looking at Rex in your barn, do you find that checking the amount of skin is the most important way to check for density?
It is definitely the most consistent because there are certain textures that can make it feel dense when it's not actually dense. When you go like this on a cottony texture, it kind of feels like it's dense because you get a lot of that grit from the cottoniness. But then when you actually pinch it, it's not actually that dense. So sometimes texture can be really deceiving, and sometimes that's when you breed two rabbits, you thought they were dense, and suddenly you get a different texture that's not as elusive, and you're like, why are the rabbits so thin? You know, you probably have been tricked by that texture into thinking that the rabbit was dense and it's not, and that happens all the time. Because it can be it's very tricky on the mind to like how it feels, right? And that's why blowing in the coat is definitely more consistent with being able to see how much skin there is. Especially when they're really dense and it's hard to get your fingers in there. It's the only real way to see how dense they are. So I'm going to grab a different example because she's amazing.
Here we have
So guys, while she's getting out of the rabbit out, do you think that if you just came from Josh and Scott's talk, we talked about guard hair, right? Do Rex have guard hair? They do? Okay. So, Brooke, you want to kind of touch on guard hair, and why is guard hair different when looking at Rex coats versus a rollback and a flyback?
Yeah, so this is like 90% the undercoat. And when you have longer guard hair, it makes them look like they have like an extra little wispiness on the end. And a lot of times when you have too much guard hair, it can make them actually look coarse. So you have significantly shorter guard hair on the Rex coat. However, there is too short. There is a proper length of guard hair, and if you have too short of guard hair, the undercoat will come pushing through, and you'll get like a little curly end. It's actually the undercoat pushing up. And that happens a lot on Duluths, like blues and lilacs. That happens where they end up kind of almost curly looking on the end.
So then how do they feel to the touch? Those ones
They're much more cottony, for sure. That's like in the spectrum, it's like cottony to silky. That's affected by your guard hair, right? Your finish is all related. The cottony ones tend to have too short of guard hair, right? And the silky ones, almost too much guard hair, but it's not quite coarse yet. And I have a buck, and he is coarse. So feel her with a heifer out. She's super dense, right? You try to do a little scissor thing, you can barely get your fingers in there because she's so dense, right?
So will the flyback part? 23.
Yeah. When they're cottony, it's too short. And you can take a rabbit that's too soft and it's curly and breed it to a coarse guard hair where the guard hair is long and then the soft it's too short and get something in between and get a nice proper texture. So when you breed two rabbits, texture is one of those things that is it's not one or the other. They're additive. It's an additive gene, right? So you can get somewhere on the spectrum in between textures. It's one of the only things that I try to put everything else into account when I breed the rabbit, but like texture, sometimes you just never know what's going to happen with the textures. Sometimes you get some oddballs. But she's super dense, and you can almost see it, right? Like when I'm trying to brush past her.
You want to blow into the fur and show us the skin for the guys watching at home? I don't see any skin from over here.
Yeah.
It's so dense.
And if she were double coated, you'd see the dark tip coming out. You'd be able to see the second coat. So you can't see her skin, but it's not because she's double coated, right? But she's somewhere in the middle spectrum of texture. I would say she's probably in the middle, lean on cottony. Probably a lot to do with the fact that she's a Duluth, though. So in Duluth fur, it's diluted out of black, so it's actually got less pigmentation than black. And because it's got less pigmentation, the hair shaft is not as rigid. It's got less pigmentation. It's actually finer and thinner and softer. And so it doesn't. That's why you don't get as good resistance and pushback on a blade because it's actually a finer hair shaft.
Do you guys know what dilute colors are? Anyone want to give some examples of dilute colors of rabbits in the ARBA?
Lilac.
And what color is this rabbit? It's a blue what? It's a blue otter, right? So it's considered a dilute version of like black otter, correct? Okay, so just to, if people didn't quite understand what dilute meant, that's
And whites are kind of similar. It's not a dilute, but that white gene that causes it to be white instead of another color, that also affects the texture. So there's certain textures on a white Rex that you don't get that texture on any other color. They have like a unique texture because of that white pigmentation. And it's similar to the dilutes. And what's funny is in a lot of other types of fur, like in satin fur, it's the rollback fur. You want it to be floaty and airy and soft, right? That's kind of the words that you would use to describe it. And dilutes and satins are much more competitive because you get that extra airiness, that extra floatiness, right? But in Rex, dilutes are so hard to win because you want them to be springy, you want them to have that pushback, and they don't because the hair shaft is wider. So it's one of the two breeds that dilutes are harder to win with. Most other breeds, dilutes are better. I'm gonna pull out my first back. He seems like he wants to. And he's not nearly as coarse as some that I've seen, but you're gonna be able to feel the difference.
you guys can get up there and feel.
Yeah, feel this right. So that's coarse. And if you look closely, you can actually almost see the hairs. It kind of looks like little fine, wispy, porcupine little hairs in this finish. And that's what you're feeling is that unevenness where you're feeling the guard hairs that are
Yeah, do you want to demo with your hands, like on this rabbit, where the guard hairs would stand up against the undercoat? If you were to use your fingers to demonstrate.
Yeah, so you can look at the finish, which the finish is the length of the guard hair. When you pitch it, you want it to be like a razor blade, right? And if you look on the edge, you'll see the little wispy edges on there, and you want it to be absolutely as crisp as possible. And so you pinch for density, but you also pinch to look at their finish. And you have to get really close to see it though, but you can see the little wispy hairs on there. Right? And what's funny is that this buck is not actually coarse. What it is, it's actually his old coat pushing out. So he's right at the age where he's losing his junior prime, going into his senior prime. And so that old dead hair getting pushed out is causing an unevenness, is what you're feeling. But once he moves out his old coat, he'll have a good texture again. But you totally can have, and that's why he doesn't have a ton of guard hair. Like this doe has significantly more guard hair. You'll see it when I pull her out. But that's why he doesn't look like he's got a ton of guard hair. You just get those little edges, that's all dead coat. And that's why it's so important to brush your rabbits, because if I brushed him really vigorously, his texture will improve because I'm pulling out all that dead coat. Right? So it's super, super important to brush them before a show, because night and day, you'll have an improved texture when you pull out the dead hairs. And you want it to be as bouncy and lively and young as possible, and that dead hair doesn't do you any favors because it's dead, right?
Because it's still a flyback coat. So, absolutely, any flyback or a fair show in the
Okay, so right off the bat, if you looking at the difference of this doe versus the other black otter that I pulled out that had silky texture, but she was super jet black, you can actually see the guard hair length on hers significantly longer than hers, right? And it's actually ruining her black color. It's making her look less intense because the light is bouncing off the guard hairs, so she looks less intensely black, right? But it doesn't feel coarse, right? Still fluffy, right? So coarseness is almost like a combination of guard hair length and the texture of the coat, because she's got long guard hairs, but she's not coarse.
Do you find on otters and casters that longer guard hairs will appear on a certain part of the body versus other parts of the body?
If it's a temporary texture and they're going to molt it out, they tend to have the coarseness right over the top of the spine, and that's probably because it's the oldest, deadest coat, because they bring hair this way, right? So this hair is going to be newer than up here, and so they'll feel like they have good texture on the sides, but they'll be coarse across the spine where they lose the hair last, right?
Someone in the audience is asking, how do you brush their coats? How do you brush a Rex coat?
That's a great question. So you could use like it's almost like a pumice stone. It's like a charcoal type of block that you would actually find for horses. We use that at the beginning because it works super well, but it kind of leaves like a black, crumbly bit residue on their coat, which totally ruins it. So what a lot of breeders will use is actually a hacksaw blade. So like a super fine tooth, like a 22 blades per inch or something hacksaw blade, because you can't get a long tooth comb down into their coat, because if it's as dense as it should be, you can't get the comb down into it. So you have to use something that scratches the surface. And that hacksaw blade is so fine, it doesn't quite cut their coat, but it just grips all those hairs right on the surface. So we use hacksaw blades. Probably they're like this long normally, probably a little big for a mini Rex, but the Rex works great. There's a lot of surface area to cover. But it's super important to brush them. And what's funny is that there's like a misconception about the fur, because it's supposed to be low maintenance, right? That's even as long as long, it doesn't get everywhere. It is almost as much high maintenance as Angora wool in the morning. So we always get pushed first, and everybody's furiously brushing rabbits because they want to get all that dead coat out. With even a little bit of dead coat, ruin your texture, ruin your finish. You'll go from a third place rabbit to a first place winning rabbit just based on brushing and blow. I mean, we have totally had that happen. We got there late, didn't get to brush the rabbits, lost on the first show, and then won on the second one when I was able to get all that dead hair out. It's really, really, really important. And you gotta get there early because Rex are usually first. So.
All right, guys, we're going to switch groups. Anybody have any questions for Brooke on Rex fur? Go ahead.
You know what? We go to shows like almost every single weekend, so usually because we brush them before every show, they get brushed once a week before the shows. When they're when they're really molted, you want to make sure that they're brushing along the out, because if they ingest too much hair, it's not good for them. So they're really, really, and they're like biscuits. When they molt, boy, they explode, because you want it to be dense, which means there's more hair to brush out, right? But when they're in a good coat, they actually don't have that much hair coming out. So it just depends on what the transition is.
This is a group who came in late.
All right, cool. All right, any other questions, guys? Thank you very much, Brooke. I think you've got one more group with you tonight. We're going to head over to Satins now with Misty. And
Are you doing all at the same time or Satin? I just sent one to Satin. I sent everybody Satin.
all right, hey, Misty, we're behind you. Hey, how are you? Thanks for being here tonight. Everyone, this is Misty Plastic. She's an Arabian judge from California, and her specialty, she has many, but her specialty tonight is satin fur. So if you don't mind, for our Facebook viewers at home, we're going to start your talk from the beginning, and you've got a bunch of new guests that have just joined you, okay? All right, awesome. So I'll take it away. Okay, cool.
For our viewers that are listening, we talked about the 3 breeds that recognize the satin fur variety. So you have your satin, your mini satin, and your satin Angora.
You guys hear that? Satin, mini satin, and satin Angora. Very good.
And then we talked about what sheen is. So it's the clarity of the outer hair shell and the ability to reflect light. So these rabbits, you see how shiny they appear, the gloss on them, and their hair shell, that outer hair shell is actually reflecting the light. And sometimes you can bend it and really see how it's just pushing that light right off the body there. And it intensifies, to this otter, a perfect example of how it intensifies the color in that satin fur. The texture of a satin and mini satin, we talked about that one too. Silky, fine, and very dense. And in complete absence of sheen, this beautiful clarity and ability of that shell to reflect light is a disqualification if it's missing in all 3 breeds. And for your satin Angora, their color, the appearance of their color is intense and brilliant because of the satinized sheen. So there's 6 characteristics of a satin fur. Number 1, sheen. Let's talk about what that was and how it's unique. Number 2 is density. Satin fur should be thick and very dense with a soft, dense undercoat. Number 3 is texture. Texture is silky, fine. That guard hair should be thin and very fine. Number 3 refers to uniformity, evenness in length, density, texture over the entire animal. Number 5, rate of return. Now this is kind of a tricky question. What kind of return does a satin fur have? Does not. Flyback is a serious fault in this breed. It has between a flyback and a rollback rate of return. And what affects the rate of return is the length of fur, the density, the finish or condition, and the texture. So an animal that's in prime condition will have a beautiful return, and you'll see that it's got movement to the coat, but it's not quick like Flyback. And the denser the fur, you don't want to see skin. When you move the fur, you want to see the base of the underfur. You want to see the undercoat. So it's a little tricky. They have kind of a unique property of fur. 1/8 to 1/8 inch, 1 inch to 1/8 inch is ideal. And fur, this is a perfect example of these two animals. Satin fur that's a little bit longer and less dense appears to have more sheen than a fur that's denser and shorter. And that's because of the appearance of the visible undercoat. So the undercoat doesn't carry as much sheen as the guard hair. So a thinner coated animal that has longer fur is going to appear to be a little bit, have more sheen than a denser coated animal because the density actually holds the guard hair off the body of the rabbit. With less density, the guard hair really sits flat on the animal. So it really enhances that sheen. But when you get down into the coat, you miss some of that thick, dispersed, soft undercoat. And that's what's building that density. So it's a really phenomenal, amazing breed. And the intensity of that satin variety really builds that color in these coats. Here's an example of a water. And you can see the depth and the clarity just intensifies in that fur. She almost looks like she has a surface color, and then she has a brilliant, darker, really rich undercolor to her. And then even on her head and ears, you just pick up all that reflective shine.
So can I just ask a question? It's a controversial one, but now that we have mini satins coming in black and Havanas come in black, of course, and they're about the same size. Like, if you're in, say, a youth and you're in a judging contest or a breed ID contest, can you give the kids some pointers on picking out the difference just by looking between a black Havana and a black mini satin?
Okay.
You're like, thanks, Alan. I know. Sorry.
The difference on the difficulty I think for breed ID is you can't touch the rabbits. So when you're sitting back, if the lighting is good, the sheen of a satinized rabbit, you should see the real reflecting properties of that light versus just a gloss. And the way that, and you can't touch them in breed ID, but you see when I bend that fur, look what happens with that guard hair. You see how it's just reflecting, it almost looks mirror-like in its intensity of just all that light lighting up all in those hair shafts. So the normal coated animals that don't have sheen but have a high gloss, I often look around the head, the ears, the muzzle, especially on your whites. This is a dead giveaway because she's yellow. With blacks, you don't get that advantage. You've got to really get in there and you've got to look. And I try to look at all angles and try to get the light hit those guard hairs because the intensity of the sheen can only be determined by good lighting and finish. So a rabbit that's a good finish with good lighting, you're going to be able to see a reflection of that light versus just a shiny that's a flat paint versus a glossy paint. It's very difficult though. I kind of try to look at that ear, and then I look down through the body of that animal, and I try to look at different angles to see where the light might pick up a reflective property of that dark hair versus just a shiny hair. Black is one of the most difficult colors to differentiate Havana, especially because the satin mutation came from movement Havana, so you can actually have many satinized fur. So it makes it even more difficult for your idea. But if I would look at the satin, I would look at the Havana, back I look at the mini satin in this case, and then the sizes too. You look for an ear on a mini satin in particular that's going to be a little bit shorter. They're going to just be not quite as chiseled, not quite as refined. You can look at some breed characteristics in addition to your sheen or lack of sheen to try and really split that breed identity of those two black animals. Look at your sizes too, because they'll kind of give you little clues and little hints on overall size, ear shape, head shape. Head shape of a Havana is very different than a good mini satin. That kind of will help to differentiate those two. Obviously, your satin animals, they're supposed to be senior for breed ID, so your satin animal is going to be much bigger as a 6-class animal than a 4-class animal. So you kind of put all your hints and your clues together. So you look at these animals and see how the texture feels compared to the rollback and flyback fur
Go ahead,
Follow
Annette.
your path through those codes.
Misty, Annette's got a question for you.
Oh yeah, I love white satins for that reason. You see how she kind of looks yellowy, like right up in here? That's ivory. She's actually not yellow, but the intensity of that sheen. See how when I stroke her hair down, look how white it gets. Look how intense white. But when it's pulled back and the guard hairs are back, it gives the appearance of kind of a cast or ivory sheen.
So if she was next to a white New Zealand, for example,
Very, very obvious.
it would be
yeah.
very obvious.
A flat white rabbit, they would not have this real ivory cast around the head and ears.
I mean, like, this is like a flat white, right? You want to do a little comparison? Like, if this was a white New Zealand,
Yeah.
would it be more like the paper? Yeah.
See the difference there? See this ivory sheen that she's got? So if you see that and you're in breed ID, you know there's something slightly different about this than another just white animal. White rabbit. And then if you look back at that lighting, you start to pick up the reflective sheen of that coat. And then you know you're dealing with that. Doesn't that feel like? Your blanket? Yeah. A good description is like a good satin coat. It almost feels like air. You're just catching just a beautiful, really really light kind of a satiny finish to it. Very fine, very thin diameter in that guard hair.
And that's got a broken Havana. Maybe you want to compare the white and the kind of that matte finish that you were
That's a good
describing.
one. Yeah. Bring this white back up. There we go. Look at the distinct difference in the whites.
So what is the broken? If you want to tell everyone, Misty, what are we looking at here?
Broken Havana,
Okay.
non-satinized, and then a white satin. And we're comparing the difference in this really very, very plain, very, very bright white versus this kind of a ivory cast that we have on the satin white. It's quite distinct, quite dynamically different in the white.
But two fur breeds, right?
Very much so, yes, very much so. Finer diameter guard hair with that clarity of that outer hair shell that reflects light. And then we've got another rabbit with beautiful fur, but a normal hair shell that doesn't have that same clarity and reflective property.
You guys want to come up and feel the difference between these two? Because there's a difference, as Misty's pointed out.
Yeah.
They feel the same.
Does it?
See if you can get more.
Does it feel? No. Allison, how would you describe the difference? When you
It's like rubbing up against a satin ribbon. You know the softness and it's more pliable.
and then
Stiff,
the Havana feels more
stiffer and
interesting.
It has more feel of that guard hair.
yeah, silky to me. Yeah, exactly.
And are the length of the guard hairs different?
Yeah.
Yeah, the ideal satin fur is 1 inch to 1 1/8 inch.
You want to pinch the coat, we can compare the two little lengths. So there's your satin. You can just see the guard hairs just kind of hovering over the undercoat, huh?
Yeah, shimmers.
Right, and then in the Havana there, this example is a little bit longer.
pokey.
Yeah.
Being awfully good.
Anyone that didn't feel it, please come up here, and these are good comparisons. So Lori, you're a Jersey Woolly breeder, so you're kind of like coming into this without a lot of experience. And is there a distinct difference?
Well, especially since my other breeds are Rollback.
Like what? What breeds?
Netherland Dwarf and Jillian's and Standard Chinchilla.
Oh, cool. So two rollback breeds.
Yeah, so we're either Rollback or Wool.
And which one of these, the Havana, Satin, or your rabbits at home, which are softer?
These are softer. And the structure on the sides. Because the curly does have short hair too. She breeds rabbits. That's just how country.
Yes, yes. She's got a lot denser under.
Angel, this is dangerous territory down here. President of the Jersey Woolly Club over here touching Havana and Satin for retired, past president, all right. Still, you're wild side over here for Angel. But you are interested in fur at all costs.
You are sweet, aren't
And
you?
the rabbit that's got the thinnest fur and the longest fur, she appears to have the most sheen because the guard hairs are laying flat against her body. Whereas rabbits that have a really dense coat, especially a dense, shorter coat, don't appear to have that much sheen simply because it's held off the body. There's so much undercoat, and the undercoat tends to not carry as much sheen as the guard hair.
All right, awesome. Any other questions for Misty? We're going to start wool over here in a second. Thank you very much, Misty. That was awesome. Thank you. Guys, hang out with Misty still if you're more interested in that.
The contrast between ivory and white.
Well, that's how when I'm looking at my babies at home trying to say they're satinized.
I was inspired to talk about wool because of this really great article. Just came out in the latest domestic ground magazine. It's written by Eric Stewart. It's fantastic. Okay? I'm a total rat nerd, and fur and fiber give me chills. I literally had when I was watching the ratings because there are so many things in here that have never been said. It's brilliant. So if you have not read this article yet, it's in the latest issue of Domestic Reference. And it's on page 10 begins. And it's called Demystifying Wool. Eric Stewart. Right? He raises French Angora rabbits and also Angora goats, which happens to be my obsession. So fiber is a really interesting thing, and it's totally related to fur. This is a longer version of what we've talked about all night long in the other presentations. And why I'm so fascinated with his article, because Eric actually says in here, this is a really good one. So this wool fiber we talk about in these wool standards is actually not unique to these Angora breeds. In fact, wool is just a longer version of what's going on in other coats. So, who's a registrar or a judge in the crowd? Anybody? Anyone ever studied for the registrar test? You studied for it, right? So you know that giant Angoras have 3 different types of wool, correct?
Yeah.
What are they?
The on hair, on fluff, and underwool.
So giant Angora in their standard specifically say they have something called on hair, which is basically guard hair. They have an underwool, which is a crimpy, shorter wool that's softer. And then they have something called on fluff, which is crimpy at the base with a guard hair tip. All right? And we've been led to believe all these years that giant Angoras are really special. Well, they are. All right? But believe it or not, all of the other wool breeds, all rabbits have this going on, just in different proportion and less extreme levels of length. You just see it more in wool because why? It's longer. It's like looking at fiber kind of under a microscope in terms of length. Okay, so it's exacerbated to see what's going on. Where in sport breeds where there's like an inch to look at, we don't really think about it, but this is actually going on in all those wool breeds. So on your little handout there, we're going to talk about 4 breeds primarily, and those are the Angora breeds. Does anyone know what those 4 Angora breeds are? English is one of them, yes. Satin Angora, French Angora, and giant Angora. The 4 Angora breeds are English, French, giant, and satin. Which of those is the biggest in size? The giant Angoras. They are the only Angora breed that don't have a maximum weight. That means they can be as big as you want. Okay? What is the smallest of the Angora breeds in size? If you weigh them. Isn't that amazing? You've seen Betty Shoe's photos all over the internet, right? They look huge. It's all wool. There's a little rabbit under there. A little 5.5, 6 pound rabbit under this massive amount of wool. It's a total farce. Totally insane. But they're actually the smallest of the Angora breeds. Okay? I need to head up next to everybody. So I know you everyone Okay, so then there's actually other breeds of rabbits that grow there, but we don't really consider them wool breeds. Anyone raised one of those breeds? One of those wool-producing rabbits, but not really a wool rabbit. Yes? What? Give me an example. Jersey woolly. What are these right here? We're actually going to use Jersey woolies tonight to talk about wool. Yeah. So they grow wool, but we really don't consider them a wool breed. Jersey woolies get 27 points on wool. The 4 Angora breeds, the Angora breed with the least amount of points on wool gets 55 points on wool. You see the difference? 27 points on Jersey woolly wool, 55 points minimum on those other Angora breeds. So that's because those are production breeds. French Angoras, giant Angoras, you find them in a farm where they're growing Angora fiber to wear. We don't list it in the US anymore, but in Europe and China, thousands of rabbits are raised to make beautiful Angora wool, and it's going to be French Angoras and giant Angoras. But you wouldn't find a barn full of fuzzy lops. Okay? They're really cute, they have 15 points on wool, but they're not a wool producing breed. We don't really judge them on that. So we're not going to talk about this tonight. Lineman is the other one, by the way. Angora density, that's the number of hairs or follicles in a given area. We talked about that in one of the other talks tonight, right? Brooke talked about it on Rex. The number of hairs in a given area. Density on all of these rabbits that have wool, including Jersey woolies, are judged the same way. So, on your question, there's some blank spaces there, right? So, you actually check pretty much everywhere that wool is growing. Over the back, over the rump, that's the rear end, right? The sides, the chest. Where's the chest? Right here, right? For the dewlap area, yep. And then, believe it or not, if you're really going to be a good evaluator of density, you're supposed to check the density on the belly. It's usually the least dense area because it's rubbing against the cage wire, right? So it's like if your hair, was rubbing against the wire all the time, you wouldn't have very much of it. So their belly is probably the least dense area, but those areas are where you check for density. And the other interesting thing is that density is the most important feature in wool on the Angora breeds, meaning that the wool standard, those 55 or more points, are divided between density, texture, and length. Okay? Density, that's the number of hairs, that's the most important part. Texture, how it feels, is second. And then last, important, is the length. Okay? Make sense? But this breed in front of me is very unique. Okay, we're not going to call it a wool breed, even though it's growing wool. It's not a production breed. But in Jersey woolies, their standard actually gives more points to what than density? Texture. Because we've got 3 Jersey woolly ladies here. I'm going to pick on them. When was the breed developed? 87. So they were recognized in 1987. And why were Jersey woolies accepted to the ARB? What was interesting about them that other breeds hadn't done before? President of the Jersey woolly. Okay, well, in the Jersey woolly standard, it says what? They're supposed to be
They've got the easy
care. So this is like a miniature Angora that you can have at your house, right? That didn't mat like crazy. Because Angora breeds mat like crazy. It's because they have more guard hair. They don't mat very easily. Hence why, when the standard was written, they put more points and emphasis on texture. So it was to encourage breeders to raise Jersey woolies that had more guard hair, so that it wouldn't mat. So they would keep these easy coat care properties. Okay? Make sense? So you can actually keep a Jersey woolly and it not mat. You don't have to groom it every day like an English Angora, which is, if you ask Betty Shue, she wakes up in the morning, she goes to bed at night, and she's groomed Angora rabbits all day long. Because English Angora is mat and felt very easily. Alright? So guard hairs serve a purpose in all of these breeds, including the breeds we talked about earlier. They're thicker and they're coarser, and they separate the underwool. So this guard hair right here, they're not a bunch of them, not numerous, but they're interspersed amongst the other fibers to separate those soft fibers from felting against each other. Because soft wool felts very easily, coarse wool doesn't felt as much. So those coarse guard hairs serve a purpose. They actually get in there and they stick up, and you can see them. Can you guys see them against my hand? See those longer? Those are coarser. You actually can see them because they actually have diameter. They're thicker than the underwool, which is down here. That's that shorter, crimpy stuff. Okay? So in question 3, it says guard hairs are thicker in diameter and thus coarser in texture. Guard hairs are more plentiful in French and giant Angoras. and help to keep the rabbit from matting by separating the fine and crimpy underwool. So the guard hairs go in there. Their job, their role is to keep all the little kids, all the little fine hairs from intermingling. Okay, so they're like the school teachers in the playground. There aren't very many of them. There's way more underwool, but they will felt and they will make a mess if their teachers aren't amongst them. Okay. The giant Angora has 3 distinct fibers. We talked about that when we first opened the talk. What are they? On hair, that's AWN. That's also called what? Guard hair. Then they have underwool, which is shorter and crimpier and softer. And then last they have on hair, which is kind of like both, right? So it's crimpy underneath and fine, and then it has a coarse, straight tip. Okay? And you're going to walk away from this talk tonight. If there's one thing you remember, and it's a big one because it's like Eric said it. All rabbits have these kind of fur types and wool types. We just don't talk about it. Okay? I hope we're going to talk about it more after this because it's so true. We will understand other breeds, whether they're wool or not, more if we accept that they're rabbits. Okay? They all are mutations of Eastern European rabbits that were domesticated. Okay? We've just, by humans and our brilliant minds, we've made 49 unique breeds in the United States. Hundreds worldwide, but they all stem from the same thing. They're all rabbits. Okay, and guess what? They all grow the same kind of fur. And last thing on this handout is we're talking about one breed of rabbit that is actually softer, the softest Angora breed. Any guesses? It's not English. Believe it or not, they're the second softest. Satin. And if you went to Misty's talk, what did she keep saying about satin texture? Soft. It feels like air. Okay. Take a satin coat from fur rabbits over there and make it 3 inches long or longer. Imagine how luxurious that would be. So they are the softest of the wool breeds, the satin Angora. Okay? And they mat like they do mat. So they're not as easy care a coat as a Jersey Woolly or a French Angora or a giant Angora. Anybody want to feel this Jersey Woolly? Come on up. Does it feel soft to you? Exactly. Guess what? You're an expert tonight because you're totally right. If you show this to the average person on the street, they'll go, "Oh my God, it's so soft," but it's not really, because it's a Jersey Woolly and it's made up of guard hair for a purpose, right? For coarseness. So easy care coat properties. And this rabbit, can anyone see the differing textures on this one?
Yeah.
There's more guard hair where? Where does it look coarser, less soft?
Like.
On the top, yeah. There are more guard hairs on the top. There's a bunch of soft wool on the bottom, probably because of the condition of the coat. They tend to shed more over the top faster, and then they're going to show more guard hair. Okay?
You don't want to glean too much out of
You don't, right? Because it's already falling out there, right? Yeah, exactly. So I know I keep saying like we're not using Jersey Woollies as a wool breed, but they're our wool example tonight. It's an Angora breed that if you read their wool description in the standard, it reads very similarly to a Jersey Woolly. Which Angora breed is most similar to Jersey Woolly? French Angora. Absolutely. Lots of guard hair, dense, but lots of guard hair. Not as soft as English or satin. And fuzzy lobs, guess what? They're pretty much the same. Lots of guard hair, not a lot of soft. Because they're easy to care for. What other examples do you have here, Allison? Another texture for us?
I've got one in that.
You got one in the mat. What one's that? The middle one?
That one.
This one?
Yeah, and the other one's sorry.
Okay, so here's a good point. Can you guys see the fibers down here? Okay? Lock those in your vision, all right? Do they look like the fibers growing up here on the shoulder? No. Which ones are thicker in diameter? Up here, right? These are coarser. These are more correct. And guess what? When you blow in the coat, it's not matted, right? Where there's lots of guard hair, it's fresh. It's uniform. But look down here. When you blow on the coat down there where it's softer, you guys see that?
Yeah.
What is that? It's matting, felting, knots. Not good, right? That's because the fibers are softer.
So this is a quiz question. If you were judging this rabbit tomorrow, it has a big mat down here. Is that a disqualification?
No.
Good job. It's not. Webbing, felting, matting, it's not attractive by any means, but it's not a disqualification. So if you ever get that on a registrar test or a wood contest test, matting is not a DQ, even though it's not good. Okay? I was gonna want to feel that one's undercoat, see how much softer it is.
Yeah, that's really soft.
Right? But then can you feel the difference up here compared to down there? Please do that. Feel the shoulder guard hairs, the wool growing up there versus the undercoat. And I wore black tonight, my favorite color. And I always say, why do I wear black to rabbit shows? Everything sticks to it, it shows up. I always look like a cat lady when I go in a restaurant after dinner, or after a rabbit show. I go, oh, that one has too many pets. You guys have any questions about wool? Take home story, go home and read your Domestic Rabbit magazine. Read the article by Eric Stewart, it's brilliant. I'm not going to dive into all of it because it's just so beautifully written. There's so many great points. This is at a judge level, okay? This is not just like jumping into the wool and trying to learn. This is an in-depth, advanced discussion, but there's something for everyone to take home with this. So I highly recommend it. And if you're not members of the ARBA, join the ARBA because you get this great magazine 6 times a year. There's so much.
Did you get this magazine from
No, I got it from the ARBA. Are you a member of the ARBA? No, you should be a member.
Do you know what ARBA is?
Your dad is? Where's dad? Uh-oh. You better sign up.
Do you know what ARBA stands for?
2 months for free. You're a member of the ARBA. For free. And it's only $15 for kids to sign up. It's a no-brainer. Right, guys? Who's a member of the ARBA right here? Oh, yeah, lots of hands. You're going to be a member.
Who can tell me what ARBA stands for?
That's right.
Thank you.
Best association on the planet. Any questions, guys? No? Thank you very much for coming tonight. It was fun.
Thank
See you
you.
tomorrow.